Welcome to my YouTube channel where we demonstrate and discuss everything related to theatrical and entertainment production crafts. Please subscribe to get the latest updates, posts, and demonstrations. While I will focus primarily on safety in the shops and comprehensive training and operating procedures for tools and machinery, I'll also demonstrate and discuss practical applications like flat and platform construction, scene painting, and more. If you'd like to see something specific, please let me know in the comments. Once again, please subscribe and power up the alert bell to get the most up-to-date notifications about new content. When it comes to legging up platforms, we have several options, whether you're using 2x4 legs or hogs-trough legs or 4x4 legs. Those are our three most common leg materials. And depending on how you build your platforms is going to depend on what your options are available for legging up your platforms. The standard go-to is to grab 2x4 and have that be your go-to material for your leg. But my favorite is the hogs-trough. And the hogs-trough is so called because it's two pieces of 1x that are put together in the shape of a trough that hogs feed out of. And if you've never been on a farm, you probably don't know what a hog's trough looks like, but it really is a V-shaped trough that people just throw food in and the pigs eat the feed out of the trough. So we call it a hog's trough, and that's basically one piece of 1x stapled and glued to another piece of 1x at a 90-degree angle. You do need to glue and staple, and accuracy matters here because the cleaner this is, the nicer everything looks and the better the compression of the joint is, the more stable it's going to be. So you want to build them pretty decently. The advantage here is that this has the same amount of stability as the 2x4, same strength in multiple directions, but is half the weight, and it's only the thickness of the 1x. There's no screwing through or bolting through 2x4s, which is tiresome and exhausting and a lot of work. We want speed and accuracy and functionality and strength. So the hogs-trough is kind of the magic tool that gives us all of those things. I'm a big fan of the hogs-trough. The problem with the hogs-trough is they don't store very well. You can stack your 2x4s, but you know, the hogs-troughs, that's not a real clean storage. And you know, once people start putting things in wonky, you know, it can be a real mess of a storage if you get into it. So they are not the best for storage. If we want to talk about hogs-trough construction, you can see straight off the bat here that this was a piece of 1x3 and that's a piece of 1x3, but it's not symmetrical. So if you want your hogs-troughs to be symmetrical, you can build them so, but you're going to have to rip two pieces of 1x. You're going to have to rip this one to be 2.5, and then this one's going to need to be 3/4 of an inch longer, so 3.25. 2.5, 3.25, and then you will have a more symmetrical hogs-trough. I'm usually more in a hurry to bother with that, so I just live with this and accept the imperfections. And it just gets to be a challenge if you are cutting things for a rake and you're cutting angles. That gets to be a little more complicated. And even with that, I'm still willing to work with it and I can navigate around it. But if you're cutting angles, you may find that, you know, the 2x4, if you're going to cut legs for that raked stage, the 2x4 is going to be your more user-friendly leg. We're talking about simple straight legging right now, so that's all we're going to deal with. We're not going to deal with more complicated legging just yet. The nice thing about the hogs-trough is it fits right nice into the corner, and I can screw this in, some screws this direction, some screws that direction, and it's done. It goes real fast. Let's review our screw patterns here with the full width of the 1x6 going into the hogs-trough leg. we want to try to do 3 screws. And we want to get 3 screws on 3 different grain lines of our leg here. So we want to put one, probably if we divide this up into thirds, 1, 2, and not land on that. So maybe 3 can go down the middle of that. But we'll just put a line there. We'll put a line there. And we'll put a line there. This is just your principle of how you're going to attach your screws. We pick one for each line and we just don't go in a diagonal. So if we put one here, we're going to put another one here, and we're going to put another one here. And that way the 3 screws are on 3 different grain lines in my leg, making it less likely that the leg is going to split out. If I put all 3 of them in the same row, then all 3 of them are on the same grain line here, and that is more likely going to split right along that path. And I've put them in 3 different grain lines this way as well. So we got one here, and one there. So that's your general screw pattern you want to live with. You don't need to be perfect about it. If you want to make a template, you can do that so you get things a little more consistent. But try to put in 3 screws in that sort of pattern. And that's going to be your strongest connection and least likely to either split out your framing or split out your leg. And that's going to apply for your 2x4 leg as well. Same pattern, but maybe not so close to there. Maybe I'll be a little further in. On this side with the 2x4, I can only do 2 screws because it's a little narrower. Remember, with this first screw, I need to get it completely flush. So as I'm going there, I've just created a little gap, and I don't want that gap, so I need to keep going until this head gets sunk below the surface and until that gap is gone. And I want to look over here and make sure there's no gap down there. But I need this gap to be gone before I continue screwing. And then I'm going to put this one in. And sometimes when I put this one in, it pushes this away a little bit, which it doesn't seem to be doing right now, but go until that's below the surface slightly and my gap is gone. And just winging it on the other side. It's a little narrower on this side. This is our wide side, so I'm going to just put 2 screws here on a diagonal. And that's good. That's the leg. We want to try to do 3 screws. And we want to get 3 screws on 3 different grain lines of our leg here. And that way the 3 screws are on 3 different grain lines in my leg, making it less likely that the leg is going to split out. And I've put them in 3 different grain lines this way. It's a little narrower on this side, so I'm going to just put 2 screws here on a diagonal. When you have a platform built out of 1x6, always, always, always screw from the outside in. In any platform you're building, in any sort of construction, you almost always want to screw from the outside in. You don't want to screw from the inside out, especially since I'm using 1 5/8 inch screws. The 1 5/8 inch screw is going to be a little bit wider than my 3/4 inch pine plus my 3/4 inch pine, which is 1.5 inches. This is 1 5/8. 5/8 is 1/8 of an inch bigger than that, and it's going to have a little pokey thing sticking out. So I want that little pokey thing on the inside. And I need to use 1 5/8 inch screws because 1 1/4 inch screws will be too short and will only have 2 or 3 teeth biting into this piece, and it's not enough to hold. So you need to use 1 5/8 inch screws. You're going through 1x into some other material, use 1 5/8 inch screws. Maybe 2 inch screws if you're in a pinch or if you need a little extra strength going into 2x4, but 1 5/8 should be good for most everything. Same platform, 2x4 leg. Same screw pattern, 1, 2, 3. 3 different grain lines this way, 3 different grain lines that way. I'm going to do this bottom one first. It looks like I'm done here, but I'm not, because if we look on the underside here, that gap is no bueno. We can't have that gap. So I need to keep going until that gap is gone. And now my gap is gone. I've got a little bit of a gap up top here, but this next screw is going to sink that down and make it go away. And then 2 screws over here. And yes, you can reuse the same screw holes multiple times until they get to be too stripped out and too sunk in and too bad. Then you make new screw holes. And if you get to be real bad, then just replace the whole side of the piece and move on. And then you reconditioned your platform and it's got more life out of it. Always, again, always screw in from the 1x outside into the 2x4. Don't get confused by the 2x4 being 1.5 inches thick. And now it's 1.5 inches thick. Should I use the 2-inch screws and screw from the inside? No, why would I want to do that? That's a lot of work. I'm screwing through a 2x4 now into a piece of 1x. That's a lot of work. That's twice as much muscle and hard work as screwing in from the piece of pine to the 2x4. So screw from the outside in, always from the outside in. Let's say we've got our platforms built out of 2x4 rather than 1x6. I don't like building platforms out of 2x4 because they're heavier and it's more work to screw through the 2x4 into the leg or have to bolt into it or do one of these other options. I just don't like the 2x4s. They are a little bit stronger than the 1x6, but I think the 1x6, by being 6 inches instead of 3.5 inches, it compensates for that, and longevity and strength is just as good as the 2x4, and it's lighter. If I was building something outdoors, a deck, I'm going to use 2x4, 2x6, 2x12 because I want that stuff to last. But this is indoor theatrical stuff, even outdoor stages that are temporary up for 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks. The 1x6 and 1x constructions is just fine. But let's say you have walked into a shop, someone else has built all the platforms and they built them all out of 2x4s. Now you've got some other options. I can still use my hogs-trough, but don't be confused by the method for the 1x6 that we have to screw outside in, because now if I screw outside in, I have to go through this 2x4 to get into this piece of hogs-trough. And that's a lot of work. Again, I'm using a 2.5 inch screw. And I'm putting all that muscle, or I'm pre-drilling through the 2x4, doubling my work. So the nice thing about the hogs-trough is I can screw from the outside in on a 1x6 platform, or I can screw from the inside out on a 2x4 platform. So the hogs-trough is ultimately a heck of a lot more versatile in working with the 2 different sizes of platforms. In this case, I'm just going to put 2 screws on the inside, 2 diagonal this way and 2 diagonal that way. I don't have as much surface area to screw into. I can't screw from the outside into this. I've only got this, so I'm going to put 2 there and 2 here. Again, after that first one, make sure that I'm nice and snug. Make sure I'm tight in the corner. If you need to have a clamp to hold these in place, get yourself a clamp. Using 1 5/8 inch screws, they're not going to poke out through the outside. I've got a full 1.5 inch thickness here. So 3/4 inch plus a little more than 3/4 of an inch. It's just fine. Easy peasy. Now I've got a 2x4 going into a 2x4. I have 3 options here. Of course, the hardest one, but the fastest one, if you are used to screwing in 3-inch screws, is going to be to use 3-inch screws. Again, make sure that gap is completely gone. Put another one in diagonally. Get it below the surface. It's probably just fine that way, but if I want to, I can also put a couple screws in over here. The 2x4 will hold much better with just screwed in from one direction. It's got a little more stability. The hogs-trough really needs to be screwed in from both directions. But if you're going with taller platforms, then you're going to want to screw in from both directions here too. And remember, my measurement of how long of a screw I should be using is what is the first material I am screwing through. If I am screwing through the 1x6 into a piece of 1x, I should be using 1 5/8 because the outside piece, the first piece I'm screwing through, is 3/4 of an inch. So I need to be at least twice as long without going overboard. So 1 5/8 or 2 inch are fine. If I'm screwing through that 1x6 into a 2x4, same screw. I'm going through the first piece is 3/4 of an inch. So twice 3/4 of an inch is 1 1/2 inches. So 1 5/8 or 2 inch screws. This is a 2x4 framed platform. The 2x4 is 1.5 inches wide. So I need to be at least twice that. So I have to use the 3-inch drywall screws. I can't use the 2.5. I need to use the 3-inch drywall screws. Twice this distance is what I need to be to make sure that I'm securing and adequately anchoring into the other piece on the other side of it. I can do the same thing with pre-drilling, and that's totally fine. Let's say I don't want to drive those 3-inch screws into the 2x4 and through the 2x4, or I don't have the strength to do it. Well, let's give ourselves a little mechanical advantage. Let's pre-drill our holes. Let's mark where we want our holes. One here and one here. It's right there. That's in line with our 2x4. I don't need to pre-drill into this piece. I want my threads to bite into that. I don't need to actually screw into this piece at all. I only need to screw into this piece. I want my threads to screw into that piece. If I look at my 3-inch screw, you'll notice that almost a full inch of it have no threads here anyway. So that's going to be 3/4 of the way through this piece of material. So I really don't need to bite into this piece at all. I really like these countersink bits. They are pilot hole bits with a countersink. There are cheaper versions with a pilot drill, and if you aren't careful with them, it's real easy to break the pilot drills. This one with the tapered bits from DeWalt is a really nice set. I'm really happy with that. It's a really good set. So I'm going to do that as my pre-drill just to mark my hole. And I'm going to pre-drill my other side here while I'm at it. What about orientation of your leg? Does it matter if it's here or does it matter if it's here? No, it really doesn't matter. It's just a matter of visual acuity. Sometimes people like to put one here and then turn this one to go here and that one to go there and that one to go there. And does that provide a fraction of additional stability in the circumference of the platform? Probably. But does it matter if you're cross bracing everything and tying it together and screwing it to the floor? Probably not. So if you prefer to give into your OCD of everything being in a line rather than everything turned 90 degrees, then put all of them in the same orientation. If I put one here and I need to put one here, I could go opposites, and that gives me a little extra strength on either side as opposed to one here and here. So we've got a couple of those different options. But I'm just going to stick with this since I started that way. I pre-drilled my hole. Now I'm going for the slightly bigger hole. Now I've got my pre-drill all done. If you notice before I do this, my screw just slides pretty smoothly right in there. There's no hindrance at all. That's a good pre-drill and pilot hole through this side. I don't need to pre-drill in that piece. I want the full strength of my threads. So much easier than having to muscle the whole thing through, but more time and extra work. This one's a little awkward. You'll notice it's a little awkward and I'm not in a good position, so I've got my screwdriver upside down and I've got the other hand pushing. So I'm using both my hands to drive it. I'm screwing upside down and I'm pushing. You have to come up with creative ways of getting the leverage that you need. I'm going to do this 4x4 screwing through the 2x4 the easy way, by pre-drilling my countersink with my pilot hole, widening out. Again, one of the nice things about 1x6 platforms is that I can screw through with drywall screws or construction screws straight through the outside into my leg, whatever kind of leg it is. I think this speeds up the whole process, so that's why I'm always going to go with the 1x6 platform construction. And you'll notice I'm using these T25 Torx construction screw heads instead of Phillips, and I'm not slipping once at all. We really need to shift over to this screw exclusively. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time with more technical theater content.